Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 AP English, our 1010 concurrent enrollment class, and our analysis of St. Martin's Guide, the 12th edition of Axelrod Cooper's classic. This is the 10th lecture for the 10th chapter, and the 10th chapter is called Analyzing Stories. Now, obviously, this is something we're very adept at by virtue of our practicing again and again in an AP English class at Moreland High School. I want to go back to a line that we use often in 303, certainly at the beginning of our time together. We pointed out in our study of the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Aeneid. We are, in fact, the stories that we tell, the stories we retell, but we're also the stories we accept and decide, the stories we decide to reject. That's pivotal as well. So we're going to now formalize in some ways the AP work that we've been doing as we treat not just stories, quite frankly, but also any number of other types of texts. I mean, the Iliad obviously is not just a story, it's a poem, isn't it? I want to begin on page 378 with this chapter, by the way, is set up a little bit differently from the other chapters that we've looked at to this point, by virtue of the fact that our models of student writing, we'll have two of them, and then we'll have the actual anthology of stories, four of them, at the end of this chapter. But I just want to begin on page 378. In this chapter, we ask you to write an analysis of a story, analyzing the selections in the guide to reading that follows will help you learn the basic features, obviously strategies, and then to skip down. As you read the essays in this chapter, you'll see how two students have analyzed the short story, The Use of Force, by William Carlos Williams, a story that will be available for you on pages 414 to 416. Iris Lee's going to interpret the story through the lens of the doctor's Hippocratic Oath, to do no harm, and Isabella Wright's going to interpret the story as a breaking away from convention. You want to examine how these writers present an arguable thesis. See, we're still working with arguable thesis writing all the way back from our chapter 6 essay number 6 work, right? Supporting the thesis with internal validation, 3 quotes from the actual story, external validation, 5 pieces of external research, obviously using the Emily Staub book. Now notice that our features of this kind of essay will go from 4 to 3. We're going to have the clear, arguable thesis on page 379. Then we're going to have the well-supported argument, that is to say the internal validation, quoting from the story itself, external validation, quoting from 5 outside sources, right? And then finally on 381, we'll have the clear and the logical organization. Okay? We normally, when we write literary criticism like this, we don't have to necessarily include views of the acrimonious audience. However, I would certainly recommend to you that you at least give some consideration to the idea that any of the arguments that you're making, you could have others that would maybe disagree with your position. Okay? And obviously you want to follow a reasoned, logical set of premises, and then of course you want to validate well. Now the readings, as we said, are just 2 student readings, and I just want to point out on page 385, notice you have the work cited there, and then as well you'll have on page 388 as well the work cited. Now by work cited, notice that it is the story itself. In both of these analyses, there is no requirement of external validation, only quoting from the text itself. We do ask for you that you go ahead and pay attention to what others have said about the story that you're working with. 390 is the assignment. You're going to write an essay analyzing one or more aspects of a story, one of the 4 from the anthology of short stories, and sometimes I will actually assign which of the 4 I want you to write on. Sometimes I'll give you the choice to choose between one of the 4. You're going to aim to convince readers that your analysis is interesting and contributes to the conversation about the story. And obviously you're going to back up your ideas with supporting quotations. That's what we call internal validation, examples from the story. And then of course 5 pieces of external validation as well. I just want to give you a review, starting on page 392, of at least 4 different ways, or even 5 different ways that we can think about how we critique stories. Obviously, this is just a short list, and since we're in AP, obviously, we know all too well what this kind of looks like. You can obviously look at characterization on page 392. I'm just working through the chart here. You can work with issues of setting on page 393, or plot structure. Obviously, conflict would have something to do with that. You can talk on page 394 about point of view. You can talk as well on page 394 about literary motif or themes, messages, what we qualify as level 2A or 2B if you're looking at point of view. Of course, there's a lot of other ways that you can look at the text. Obviously, when we look at literary text, we look at things like our big five. What does the text say about epistemological perspective, knowledge? What does it say about ontological views, notions of being? What does it say about psychology and sociology? The individual mind, the group of minds, and then finally, what does the text say about theodicy, the notion that there is evil in the world and suffering? You're obviously going to be deciding how specifically you want to address all of these. On 397, they do give you some suggestions for good thesis work. Notice 4 of them listed near the bottom of 397. Many readers of X, the title of the text, point to blank, state features of the story. But an important aspect of the story that's often overlooked is blank. Or look at this one. A common superficial reading of X, name the story or character, is that blank, common conclusion, but in fact, blank, and here your own conclusion. Or, through the actions of X, the name of a character, we're led to this surprising conclusion, blank. Or, through the events unfolded in X, the name of the story, readers are led to this disturbing conclusion. The end of and then obviously you're going to provide your information, right? 398 asks an important question, and it's one of those central ones. How can I integrate evidence from the text with the story? Obviously, paraphrasing, summarizing, short quotes to support your analysis, right? And then you want to provide where those quotes come from. Pay attention to this page, right? You want to comment directly on what you have quoted, paraphrased, or summarized so that readers will understand the relevance. In other words, you explain why the quote is important. And of course, we know this. We're always setting up our quotes, and then we're always providing our quotes, and then we're always explaining our quotes. It's part of our compositional understanding, right? Finally, let's jump over to the anthology itself that begins on page 409 and our 4 titles. The first one, Kate Chopin, a story that we're familiar with at LearnStrong.net. We've already given a set of comments that you're free to obviously study, and I would hope that you would study those in your help of this text. Then over on to page 410, James Joyce's classic Araby. We've also given lectures on Learn Strong about this one as well, and you can go and find that one. The third of the texts is the one that our 2 student writers are writing on, William Carlos Williams' The Use of Force, and then finally we have Kincaid's Girl on page 416. So those are the 4 stories from which you'll be deriving your analyses. Notice that in this assignment, you're only critiquing one of the 4. We could ask you to critique 2 or 3 or even all 4 of them in comparative analyses. We are not asking that for this assignment. So I'll let you go to work. I think you have enough background information now to be able to write this paper well. Best of luck enjoying one of those stories.